The morning began like any other, with the hiss of the coffee machine and the faint hum of the apartment's climate stabilizers keeping the air at a perfect 22.3 degrees Celsius. He was mid-sip, crouched over an ancient Earth artifact, an admittedly dusty copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that he insisted on keeping for sentimental reasons, when the sound of tapping, light but insistent, echoed from his front door. At first, he assumed it was a neighbor testing the intercom, or perhaps one of those overzealous delivery drones, but the tapping grew impatient, deliberate. He set the mug down, spilling a precarious circle of coffee onto his cluttered desk, and approached with cautious curiosity. Before he could reach the door, it slid open silently. No handles, no creaking hinges, just the smooth, sterile efficiency of modern urban design. Standing, there was a figure small enough to make him instinctively crouch to meet eye level, but her posture radiated authority. She looked almost human. A young woman, perhaps no older than 16 in human years, with wide amber eyes that gleamed with a sharp intelligence, and hair like molten silver, catching the artificial light and scattering it across the polished floor. But she was undeniably alien, too. Delicate luminescent lines traced along her temples and the tips of her pointed ears, subtle patterns that pulsed faintly in response to the environment. Her expression was one of complete seriousness, a tiny frown tugging at the edges of lips that looked far too small to carry so much authority. "I have been assigned to you," she announced, voice crisp, precise, and carrying just a touch of what might be called cosmic exasperation. "You are required to have a spouse. I am that spouse." He blinked once, twice. Coffee sloshed over the rim of his mug. "Excuse me," he said, attempting to mask incredulity with polite tone, though his brain had already started a full-scale rebellion. Assigned to me, like legally assigned, or is this some kind of joke?" She shook her head, silver hair swaying in an oddly satisfying wave. "No joke, the assignment is legally binding. According to Galactic Demographic Regulation Code 12. 4b, humans of your age and physiological profile must maintain spousal companionship for optimal societal efficiency." She tapped a small, glowing tablet she held at her side, and the luminescent patterns along her skin flickered in sync, as if the data was translating into light. He coughed. Optimal societal efficiency. His apartment cat, who had been watching the exchange from the top of the refrigerator with the disdain only cats can muster, yawned. Even it seemed to understand that the universe had gone slightly mad. "Are we talking romance here? Or paperwork?" She frowned. "Romance is irrelevant. Paperwork is essential. You will comply." He stared at her, and the absurdity of it hit him fully. A small, ethereal girl, radiating light and authority, had just walked into his apartment to tell him that he was married now, or would be officially on paper, and apparently in some cosmic sense of law he barely understood. He felt the urge to laugh, and did, though it emerged as a strangled snort that nearly sprayed the coffee back onto the book. "Right, of course, assigned spouse, makes perfect sense." "You must prepare," she continued, entirely serious, completely ignoring his sarcasm. "We begin orientation immediately. Emotional synchronization exercises, legal compliance forms, and daily observational logging. Failure to comply will result in corrective measures." He raised an eyebrow. "Corrective measures." "Yes," she leaned forward slightly, the tips of her ears glowing a soft blue. "Not physical, primarily administrative, mostly paperwork." The absurdity was so thick he almost forgot to breathe. He dropped onto the couch, muttering under his breath, "Paperwork, daily logs, synchronization. I didn't even get a chance to learn how to make decent coffee yet." The alien girl glanced at him, unimpressed, and tapped her tablet. Suddenly, a holographic projection sprang to life above it. Charts, graphs, and glowing lines of alien text that hovered in the air with the kind of elegance only a civilization centuries ahead of humanity could manage. "Step 1, she said, "we will determine compatibility via real-time emotional resonance mapping." The patterns along her skin pulsed more rapidly now, casting shifting colors across the room. "It will be painless." "Painless, she says," he muttered. "Just like my last colonoscopy, sure, no problem." Despite himself, he had to laugh, and she, after a brief pause, perhaps registering amusement for the first time, tilted her head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost human. Then she added, "Your laughter is noted, it will be recorded." He gestured vaguely at the floating holograms. "Recorded, why not? Just make sure you don't put it on the internet." The thought of intergalactic authorities judging his sense of humor was somehow worse than any legal sanction. And so began the oddest morning of his life. A small alien girl, radiating light and judgment in equal measure, had assigned herself as his spouse, and he had absolutely no roadmap for what to do next. Somewhere in the background, the apartment cat leapt from the refrigerator and landed on his lap with the air of a CEO deciding it had tolerated enough nonsense. He petted it absently while the girl began issuing forms, explaining with utmost seriousness how to fill out columns labeled emotional efficiency quotient and spousal synchrony index. Somewhere deep inside, he realized that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be normal again. And yet, as he filled out the first form under her watchful amber eyes, he couldn't help but think, at least it was kind of funny. Somehow, amid the blinking holograms, luminescent skin, and interstellar legalese, he felt a flicker of curiosity. What would it be like exactly to have a small alien girl, small enough to make you worry she might get lost in a crowd of humans, assigned as your spouse? He did not yet know, and somehow in the most absurdly bureaucratic way imaginable, that uncertainty was the beginning of everything. He woke to the smell of ozone and toast. The toast was a problem, of course, because his toaster had been replaced overnight with a device that looked like a cross between a cube of polished obsidian and a holographic projector. He prodded it with a tentative finger and watched as it whirred to life, projecting a three-dimensional diagram of what he assumed was the ideal toast configuration, complete with glowing indicators, suggesting that his previous life's toasting habits were inefficient by approximately 47.3%. He sighed, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and then noticed the small figure perched atop the kitchen counter, legs swinging like a child at recess. The small alien woman, or girl, depending on how one quantified her chronological age versus human perception, looked impossibly serene despite the fact that she was surrounded by the chaotic hum of a kitchen clearly designed for someone taller, larger, and slightly more accustomed to not having their appliances lecture them. Her skin, now pulsating with faint green patterns, shimmered in time with her breathing, which made him feel vaguely like he was sharing space with a living mood ring. "You are late," she said, in that same clipped tone that suggested both disappointment and cosmic inevitability. "Breakfast synchronization begins in 7 minutes and 22 seconds. He squinted at the toaster. "You measure breakfast like a countdown timer." "Yes," she replied with a faintly superior nod. "Precision ensures efficiency. Efficiency ensures optimal alignment of interspecies cohabitation metrics." He muttered something under his breath that might have been, or total insanity, and was rewarded with a small, almost imperceptible twitch of amusement at the corner of her amber eyes. He wasn't sure if she had found it funny or if he had simply imagined it. The toaster projected a slice of bread into the air and began levitating it, spinning gently while a small drone-like attachment brushed it with a substance that emitted the faint smell of cinnamon. "Optional flavoring," she said, "though regulated at precisely 0.4 grams per cubic centimeter to maintain caloric balance." He took a cautious bite, noted the perfection, and felt the tiniest thrill of panic. If a toaster could judge him, what else in this apartment had opinions about his competency as a human? She stood and floated down lightly from the counter, her small form moving with the grace of someone who had long since internalized zero-gravity locomotion. Her hair trailed faint luminescent streaks, and she adjusted her tiny wrist device that now projected a holographic clipboard with the morning's agenda. Domestic integration, emotional compliance exercises, and optional recreational paradox puzzles. "Recreational paradox puzzles?" he asked, raising one skeptical eyebrow. She inclined her head slightly, eyes glinting. "Humor enhances synaptic efficiency. Also, humans respond poorly to too much compliance. Puzzles introduce manageable levels of cognitive chaos." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "So, you're saying I need to laugh or I might break something?" "Affirmative," she replied, "preferably without breaking the furniture. We have not yet accounted for compensation of galactic indemnity clauses." The first exercise took them into the living room, which had been subtly restructured while he slept. Floating panels displayed grids of light, each representing potential interaction patterns, emotional responses, and compatibility projections. She instructed him to walk from one end to the other while maintaining eye contact, counting silently in binary. His first attempt ended with him tripping over a furniture cube that had inexplicably risen to chest height. the cube floating back into place with perfect levitation while the small alien watched, amused. "You are inefficient," she said, tapping her tablet. "Adjust gait, adjust cadence, adjust emotional projection." "Emotional projection?" he wheezed. "I thought we were just walking in a room." "Yes, you project your emotional frequency with every step. Humans underestimate the amplitude of their internal states. I am merely quantifying it." By the time the third attempt rolled around, he had developed an odd rhythm. Step, hum, apologize to the furniture, step, hum, try not to fall. She mirrored him almost exactly, her delicate patterns pulsing in synchronized waves, and he noticed a faint warmth in the way their proximity seemed to warp the light around them. The absurdity of it, him, a fully grown human, dancing across a room under the gaze of a small, glowing alien girl while counting silently in binary, made him laugh out loud, and this time she laughed too. It was a soft sound, musical, almost like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but it carried with it the weight of something unexpectedly comforting: acknowledgement. Next came the domestic integration exercises, which involved him attempting to cook a simple meal while she projected holographic guidance and occasionally levitated ingredients into his hands with the precision of a robot chef. He managed to set a spoon on fire once, a feat she catalogued with a single nod. "Not catastrophic," she said, "merely a minor deviation in procedural success metrics." By mid-morning, he was drenched in sweat, smoke, and the smell of slightly overcooked protein paste. Yet he found himself thinking less about the surreal legality of their assignment and more about how much fun it was to try and keep pace with her. The small alien girl, whose entire existence seemed to oscillate between cosmic seriousness and impish delight, had become both a teacher and a partner in absurdity. And the more he stumbled, spilled, or muttered, the more the floating holographic grids pulsed with faintly approving lights. At one point, while attempting to measure the precise caloric output of a liquid breakfast replacement, he sneezed violently. The holographic projections shivered and flickered, and she tilted her head, one amber eye narrowing. "Human biological processes are chaotic," she said. "Noted, probability of recurrence logged." He laughed, a deep, resigned chuckle, and muttered, "I think I'm going to need a manual just to survive breakfast with you." She smiled faintly, the luminescence of her skin tracing delicate arcs across her face, and for a moment he almost believed she understood humor in the same clumsy, human way he did. "Perhaps," she said, "but survival is overrated. Integration is more enlightening." By the time the sun, or more accurately the artificial orbital simulator, shifted to its zenith, he was covered in a mixture of liquid nutrition, glowing residues from the holograms, and a profound sense of baffled amusement. Somehow, in this bizarre fusion of domesticity, light, and interstellar compliance, he realized that for all the absurdity, the small alien girl was teaching him more about connection, laughter, and adaptability than he had learned from decades of solitary human living. He glanced at her as she floated nearby, a tiny hand tapping a holographic panel. Her amber eyes caught his, and for the first time her small smile seemed less procedural and more deliberate. "Next exercise," he asked, smearing a streak of protein paste across his cheek. "Next exercise," she said, tilting her head and letting the luminescent lines along her temples flare briefly, "is optional but highly recommended. Paradoxical humor calibration." He groaned, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Somehow he had a feeling he was going to survive it. Maybe. And somewhere deep inside, a tiny part of him was already looking forward to the chaos. The room smelled faintly of ozone and burnt toast, an aroma that seemed permanently attached to the apartment since the small alien girl had arrived. He rubbed his temples, realizing that his morning routine no longer included solitude, coffee, and a single-minded focus on human inefficiency. Now it involved hovering light grids, a hovering humanoid no taller than a broomstick handle, and a series of exercises that alternated between emotional mapping and mild peril. "Today," she announced, stepping onto the living room floor with a precision that suggested she could walk on air in zero gravity, "we will explore human spontaneity within controlled parameters." Her amber eyes sparkled faintly, and the patterns along her temples glowed soft violet, a color he had started associating with mischief. He squinted. "Controlled spontaneity. That sounds like an oxymoron, or something your species invented to torture humans." "Affirmative," she said, almost solemnly. "Humor levels must be calibrated to avoid emotional underflow." Too little chaos impedes adaptation. Too much results in catastrophic disorder. He groaned, but curiosity got the better of him. He had already survived levitating toast, binary walking exercises, and a minor kitchen fire, so what could possibly be worse? She gestured to a corner of the room where a series of floating spheres orbited an invisible axis. Each emitted soft tones, ranging from the deepest bass to almost painful treble. These are humor resonance nodes, she explained. You will interact with them in sequence, attempting to induce unpredictable reactions without breaching operational limits. He stared, so make the spheres laugh. Yes, or cry, or oscillate within safe resonance parameters. Do not break them, do not break yourself. Probability of minor disarray is expected and logged. He gave a dramatic sigh and extended a cautious hand toward the nearest sphere. It wobbled slightly, like a gelatinous jellyfish, and then released a high-pitched squeak that made him jerk back and spill the last of his protein-paced breakfast onto the floor. The small alien girl's head tilted, and he swore the luminescent streaks along her ears pulsed faster, which he assumed was her way of taking notes or expressing delight. Improper human reaction detected, she said. Adjust amplitude. He blinked. Adjust amplitude. Yes, she replied, and before he could ask how, she demonstrated. With a small gesture, the spheres shifted into a perfect pattern, spinning and wobbling in harmony while emitting a series of chirps that formed a kind of interstellar melody. Observe, learn, replicate with individual variants. He spent the next hour tripping over invisible thresholds, spilling concentrated flavor gels, and inadvertently inducing one sphere to spiral wildly before she caught it midair with a flick of her wrist. Her laugh, soft and musical, echoed around him, and for some inexplicable reason he found himself laughing too, partly out of amusement, partly out of self-preservation, partly because the whole situation was utterly absurd. By mid-afternoon, they had moved on to the paradoxical coordination drill, which involved him following a holographic trail of symbols while reciting human proverbs in reverse, timed to a metronome that ticked in prime numbers. She hovered beside him, occasionally tapping the tablet on her wrist to correct his cadence or adjust the glow of his emotional resonance. You missed the 31st beat, she said sharply. Consequences are minor but logged. He threw up his hands. 31st beat. I was reciting curiosity killed the cat backward while hopping on one foot. How could anyone, any species, get that perfect? Her small shoulders shrugged, but there was a faint twitch at the corner of her mouth, as if she might be on the verge of genuine amusement. Humans exaggerate difficulty, she said. Data does not. Attempt again. He muttered something under his breath that may have been a curse or a philosophical reflection on life's absurdity, and she recorded it anyway, presumably in some alien humor index. After a brief, chaotic interlude involving him tripping over his own shadow projected by the orbital light simulator, they moved on to the final exercise. Emotional improvisation. He had to improvise a narrative about a human-alien partnership while simultaneously responding to random stimuli. Luminous balls, levitating utensils, a holographic parrot that recited Klingon poetry. The girl watched silently, occasionally glowing in colors that suggested either analysis or mischief, and he quickly realized that failing to make the scene coherent in any measurable way resulted in her tutting and flicking a holographic timer that buzzed in his peripheral vision. I give up, he said, collapsing onto the couch mid-story, a half-formed tale of interstellar love and cosmic bureaucracy spilling from his lips. I can't coordinate with levitating toast, a singing parrot, and you glowing like a neon mood lamp. She floated down beside him, her small form perfectly balanced as always, and a faint amber glow highlighted her facial contours. Failure is part of learning, she said, and laughter is an acceptable metric of progress. He glanced at her, a slow smile forming despite his exhaustion. Laughter as progress? That's actually not terrible. She nodded once seriously. I have observed humans adapt in illogical but effective ways. He shook his head, realizing that she might be right. Between the absurd exercises, levitating kitchenware, and interstellar paradox drills, he had begun to feel lighter. Even amid the chaos, the bureaucracy, and the surreal expectation that a tiny alien girl was somehow his co-pilot in life, there was a thread of camaraderie forming. Something strange and unquantifiable, glowing faintly in the violet and amber light of her patterns. By evening, they were both exhausted. He sank into the couch while she floated beside him, small, luminous, and entirely otherworldly. She tilted her head at him, amber eyes glinting like distant suns, and for the first time she allowed herself a brief, genuine smile. "You are improving," she said softly. "Metrics indicate higher resilience and humor retention. Probability of catastrophic emotional failure is reduced to 21%. He laughed, a full, shaking laugh that made his chest hurt in a good way. 21%, that's actually comforting in a twisted way. The holographic grids dimmed, the levitating spheres stilled, and the apartment returned to an uneasy quiet. Somewhere in the background, the orbital simulator adjusted the sun's angle to a perfect sunset, casting warm hues over the room. He leaned back, marveling at how utterly absurd the day had been. How surreal it was to find himself navigating the lessons of a small alien girl whose skin glowed and patterns pulsed with each interaction. And yet, despite the chaos, the structured absurdity, and the constant, unyielding monitoring, he realized something remarkable. He was having fun. It wasn't just survival or bureaucracy or even interstellar obedience. It was companionship, the kind that arrived wrapped in glowing light, paradoxical humor, and the smallest, most infuriatingly competent alien girl imaginable. For the first time that day, he closed his eyes and allowed himself a full, deep breath. Somehow, he thought, he might actually survive this, maybe even enjoy it. He woke to a gentle hum that wasn't quite the orbital simulator, not quite the usual apartment machinery. Instead, it was the quiet, precise resonance of the small alien girl moving about the room, her silver hair shimmering in soft arcs of light as she floated between the kitchen and living area. Something in the rhythm of her movements was familiar now, predictable only in the sense that he had learned how to anticipate the quirks of her tiny, glowing form. And he smiled, stretching with the kind of languid ease that comes from surviving chaos and emerging slightly wiser on the other side. "You are awake," she said, her voice carrying that same calm authority, but with a hint of amusement now, faint enough that he almost missed it. Her amber eyes pulsed faintly as if syncing with the soft morning light, the patterns along her temples forming gentle waves rather than sharp instructional spikes. "I am," he said, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "And I think I understand breakfast a little better now, or at least your toast protocols." She inclined her head slightly, almost imperceptibly pleased. "Your efficiency metrics have improved. Error rates reduced by 17%. He raised an eyebrow. 17%, I'll take it. For the first time, they moved through the morning without hovering spheres, paradoxical drills, or levitating toast. The apartment seemed to breathe with him in a softer way, the light from the orbital simulator casting long, warm shadows. And yet, even without structured exercises, he felt the threads of training, humor, and absurdity that had woven themselves into the fabric of their daily life. He realized that what had once seemed chaotic now had a rhythm, a harmony of unpredictability and shared understanding. "Today," she said, floating down beside him, "we will attempt the final exercise. Interspecies improvisation without structured guidance. It will test emotional resonance, humor retention, and adaptive collaboration. Failure is unlikely, but noted." He groaned, "Final exercise, huh? Somehow I feel like the universe just labeled me a cosmic intern forever." She flicked her wrist, and a small holographic pad appeared, projecting a landscape that resembled a human living room but shifted subtly with impossible geometry. Walls that bent at angles humans couldn't navigate comfortably. Furniture that floated or retracted on whim. A ceiling that seemed to expand and contract slightly. And a window showing a sunset that was both real and artificial, orange bleeding into violet. "Consider it a simulation," she said. He glanced at it and then back at her, the absurdity hitting him fully. "So basically, improv theater, but the set keeps trying to swallow me." "Affirmative," she said almost smugly. "And it is highly entertaining." He laughed, a rich, unguarded laugh, and found himself moving into the simulation with less hesitation than he would have thought possible a few days ago. He tripped over a floating rug, and she reached out with delicate, glowing fingers, steadying him mid-fall while her patterns flared a soft pink. "Careful," she said. "Your gravity vector is slightly off." "I'll try," he said, trying not to topple into a holographic armchair that blinked in protest. "But I have to admit this is fun, in a horrifying, interstellar paperwork sort of way." She tilted her head, a gesture that had become almost human in its subtlety, and her laughter, soft, chime-like, filled the room. "Fun is a